Greetings from a very hot Sweden. In this video I'll be talking about how I made the creature in my latest short film called Together that is available right now here on my channel, so go and watch it before you watch this video if you don't want any spoilers. So in this video I'll be talking about how I made this thing, this creature from scratch, and what I had to learn to create this monster. So without any further ado, let's go. So a little bit of background about me when it comes to 3D. I've never created a creature, a character from scratch before, so this was the first time for me to do such a thing. So I had to go online and watch a couple of tutorials. There is a preferred way to do things in this chain of event when you go from modeling to actually render out your character. I have a lot of experience in 3D when it comes to motion graphics and architectural stuff. A little bit of particle animations and stuff like that, but never tried to make a character from scratch. When I was finished writing my script, I had this character that I described as something between an insect and a human. So just to give myself a start and help with the concept of what I wanted to create, I asked Midjourney to come up with some ideas for a creature. At Discord, I wrote a prompt line, something along the lines of a humanoid insect monster inside of an apartment in the dark. And I got a lot of cool suggestions, and some of those in the beginning was pretty funny, pretty comical, like this one. So I tweaked the prompt a little bit, and eventually I got this generated image, and I fell in love with this creature right off the bat. I liked the hair so much, I knew I had to bring that idea with me into this design I was going to develop. But I knew from the start I didn't want to make this design so much geared towards an insect, because then I knew I had to go very deep into the anatomy of an insect and spend a lot of time researching how insects look in their face and their body. I didn't want to spend all of that time doing that, so I wanted to move the design more into a human-like monster. And here's a point I want to make, because since this was the first time I was modeling a character, I knew that if I tried to make a proper human, it would look wonky and weird because it's my first time. That was something I could take advantage of, because if my monster is somewhat humanoid but it's all weird and not correct in its anatomy, then you know it serves the purpose of being horrible. So I used a drawback that I had, not having any experience doing 3D character modeling before, and I used that as a strength instead when doing this creature. And I also knew early on that I would need to hide the flaws in this design by putting it in the dark, by having it out of focus, and also covering it with hair, both body hair and hair covering its face. If you're watching this video and wonder what that is, that's my haze pumping into my room here. If you want to know how I did that thing, check out my other video here. By this point, I had a good idea of how I wanted to make this design, and I started with doing a low-resolution model of this creature I had in mind, but only doing one side of it, because in Cinema 4D and all the other 3D programs, you can just mirror this side that you're doing and save you a lot of time. So once this low polygon model was done, I went into sculpting, which means that you up the polygon count in the model so you can go in and sculpt some finer details into the model. And basically what I did here was just to go in and brush around with all of these tools that I had. When I was done doing all of these details, I converted the sculpt into textures. like normal maps and displacement maps. And the reason you're doing this is because you can take your low polygon model and just add a displacement texture on top of it. That will convert it into a high resolution model in rendering instead of having a huge count polygon model in your viewport. And this will actually also speed up the rendering later on. So once I had my displacement and normal maps finalized, I started to add colors and bump maps and adding more details in the shading department in Cinema 4D. I used a lot of noise, for example here in the color channel. If you add a noise as a color and then you can play around with how the noise will change over this creature's skin. And you can use a lot of different noise layered on top of each other to get a very randomized effect on the skin. When the model was starting to become finalized, I started to work on animation. And I spent a lot of time looking at different insects on how they move their legs. But I found that since the creature never picks up any speed, I didn't really need to do that sort of animation cycle with its legs. So I just had to play with it and get a feel for when I needed to move the legs to make the creature come forward. When I was finished with the animation, I started looking at lighting. And my idea here was to light this creature, this model, with only indirect light from these white walls that we have in this scene in the hall. But I discovered quickly that using soft light and indirect light, the shadows become soft and it's hard to see the details in this creature's skin. So I chose to light my character with hard lights, mostly from behind, from the side, to get a more definition on its skin. And here's something I've been realizing doing these short films I've been doing when it comes to 3D characters. Adding lights in the 3D environment that wasn't there when you shot the footage, that's okay. As long as it looks good and it merges with your footage, do whatever you want. What looks good should be your top priority and what is realistic should be your second priority, if that makes sense. Now I was done with the model, I had my animation and lighting and the sculpting and all of that was done. Now it was time to composite it inside of After Effects. Before I even started filming this scene, I knew that I would probably have a good amount of problem making a 3D tracking out of this footage because I had my actor move across the frame, which makes all of these 3D tracker lose their mind and unable to track anything from this footage. When I tried out all of these 3D trackers, my worries were confirmed, so I did a little of a custom solution here. First, I spent a little time doing a manual track inside of After Effects on the background. Since there aren't so many frames, I just did this by hand and didn't have to worry about the actor crossing the frame since I was doing this manually. So now I had the background which I knew I can attach my 3D model to. But still somehow the virtual camera needed to move the same way as the physical camera. What I ended up doing is I exported the sequence into Cinema 4D and then I timed where I needed to change the perspective on the virtual camera to match the physical one. So what you're seeing is no 3D camera track at all. It's all fake. It's just a 2D track in After Effects, and from Cinema 4D I have this footage that changes the perspective of the model that's always in the center of the frame, because when I glued that footage to the background I needed to have it stationary because this footage is going to move with the background. It worked much better than I anticipated. So of course it's always better to make a proper 3D track, and honestly when I shot the scene I should probably have been putting a lot more tracker marks all around this hallway. That's a little miss on my part, but still I don't think that 3D tracker would have been able to track this footage anyway because of this character crossing the frame. Since I shot this short film with a lot of haze in this apartment, I had to match this also in my models. So you can see that the model is a little bit hazy when it's back in the hallway, and when it comes forward it becomes clearer and more contrasty. And also rendered out a lot of hair, you know, this black disgusting hair and this body hair. That was also something I knew I wanted to do to cover up much of the imperfections of the model, and also hide this face I was trying to model after some kind of a human. Then I added all of these flies, this swarm of flies that goes around this creature. I will be doing another video about how I made all of those disgusting flies flying around in this short film. So it's time to conclude this video. I can say that it was very fun to learn the entire process of making a 3D character like this. In Alien Infestation, I found this model online, which I just, you know, tweaked a little bit and animated. But here in Together, I made it from scratch, and it was real nice to see this monster come to life while I was working with it, and drawing inspiration from Midjourney and then bringing that concept into something that I wanted to develop. Soon I will be selling this creature as a 3D printable file for you guys to get yourself a little horrible figure to be putting on your shelf at home. And when people ask what the hell is that, you can say that you're supporting this solo filmmaker from Sweden doing weird shit. You will also be supporting me in my next upcoming project, which I will be talking about here on my channel in the near future. So stick around. That is all I have for now. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.